Hi, this is Daniel DiTuro. Do you need a substitute for wheat flour as a thickening agent? Wheat flour, like all-purpose flour, is used as a thickening agent for many recipes, like making a roux to thicken gumbos and sauces, and to thicken puddings and cream fillings. If you have celiac disease or are on a gluten-free diet, there are gluten-free alternatives to wheat flour. White flour is about 75% starch. The goal is replacing the starch in flour with a gluten-free starch. Some common substitutes include cornstarch, potato starch, rice flour, also known as rice starch, tapioca flour, and arrowroot. Some countries use flour instead of starch. For example, corn flour versus cornstarch. In the U.S., corn flour is flour made from corn and has a lower starch content than cornstarch. Cornstarch is made from the starch-rich endosperm, corn flour from the whole grain, and includes fiber. Even in the U.S., it can be confusing. Tapioca flour and tapioca starch are used interchangeably. Tapioca, flour, and starch are made from the cassava plant, but there's also a cassava flour. Cassava flour is used as a wheat flour substitute for gluten-free baking and cooking, like making bread, tortillas, and cookies. Cassava starch, called tapioca, is used as a thickening agent. Tapioca flour is not 100% interchangeable with cassava flour. In the U.S., cornstarch is a popular thickening agent. Some people use cornstarch instead of flour due to its neutral taste. Cornstarch is 90% starch. The substitution is 1 1/2 teaspoons of cornstarch for each tablespoon of flour. So 1 tablespoon of cornstarch equals 2 tablespoons of flour. Unlike flour, cornstarch must be dissolved in cold liquids or made into a slurry before adding to hot foods to prevent clumping. Cornstarch is not a suitable substitute for making a roux to thicken gumbos and sauces. Arrowroot at 88% starch has the same substitution ratio, 1 1/2 teaspoons per tablespoon of flour. Like cornstarch, arrowroot must be dissolved in cold liquid before adding to hot foods. White rice flour at 80% starch is a 1-to-1 substitute for wheat flour. Unlike cornstarch and arrowroot, rice flour can be substituted for wheat flour to make a roux. Tapioca flour is another 1-to-1 substitute for wheat flour. Unlike wheat flour, tapioca flour is added at the end of cooking. To thicken soups and other foods, tapioca flour is stirred or whisked into hot but not boiling foods. Tapioca flour becomes stringy when brought to a boil. When foods reach a simmer after adding tapioca flour, remove it from the heat and let it sit about 15 minutes, stirring once or twice during the first 5 minutes. Potato starch is not as common as cornstarch in the U.S., but many cooks prefer it to cornstarch. Potato starch is used like cornstarch. Substitute 1 1/2 teaspoons per tablespoon of flour. Like cornstarch, dissolve potato starch in cold liquid before adding to hot foods. Potato starch thickens quickly, but will thin out when overcooked. When using potato starch, remove foods from heat as soon as it has thickened. Some takeaways are there are gluten-free substitute thickening agents for wheat flour. Most are not a direct substitute. Arrowroot, cornstarch, and potato starch must be dissolved in cold liquids. And tapioca flour and cassava flour are not 100% interchangeable. Please leave a comment if you have any questions about this video. Thank you for watching and healthy eating.